Welcome, everybody. Like I say every week, I hope everybody is healthy and well and continuing to social distance as much as possible, or at least physically distance. I know there's some folks that I could tell are getting antsy. We had our plant sale pickup the last 2 weeks, and the first week, everybody was very polite and nice. And the second week, we had some more people who seemed to be getting a little frustrated with staying at home, and have asked about the Arboretum opening back up. We're subject, so I'll just mention that we are subject to both, the state regulations, and it sounds like we may get some information tonight from the governor that may change things. But we're also subject to the university regulations, and they've been very, very, really pretty strict and erring on the side of caution to protect staff and students and the public. So hopefully we'll know a little bit more soon, because we'll get some additional guidance from the governor. But I don't expect us to throw open the gates anytime in the very, very near future. So I'm going to start my screen and we will get going. All right, before we get into the talk, Chris has been doing phenomenal work in terms of moving programming online, but also developing new programming. I've got a few things. Actually, hold on just a second. I think I'm on the last slide that I had up before we started. This is the link that you should be using for these talks right here. If you use this link rather than a different link, this will always get you here. There's a possibility that we would have to change the other links that were sent out earlier. So jcra.ncsu.edu, which is our main website, and then /midweek. And that will always get you here. I was mentioning Chris is doing a lot of these programs. One that just started yesterday is Foodscape Revolution, Practical Solutions for Growing Your Own Food with Brie Arthur. It's 6 classes. You can still sign up now. Chris has recorded the first session, and so if you sign up, you'll still be able to get a recording of that first session, so you won't have missed anything. But it's a fantastic program. Brie has really put a lot into it, and it's got, no matter where you are, it's got something for you. If all you've got is a balcony, there's going to be talking, some discussion on how to grow food, that kind of space. If you don't have a lot of sun, if you don't have a lot of space, if you don't have a lot of time, really kind of modern food gardening. So highly recommend that. New one that just got listed on our website and you can register for is Gardens from Around the World. This is the English-speaking version, so it's all English-speaking countries. It'll be every Monday in June from 6:30 to 8:30. Bryce Lane, who is always a fantastic speaker, is doing 4, how many classes is that, Chris? 4, I think 4 of the classes, and then I'll be doing the one in the middle, so you can skip that one if you want. You've heard everything I've got to say by now.
That's correct. 5 classes total, you're one of them.
So, but it should be a lot of fun. We've had requests for that, people who are tired of being at home, looking to at least see some other gardens. And the Southeastern Plant Symposium at home will be June 12th. We've got a phenomenal lineup of speakers. I won't go through them all, but this is really a world-class program. Dan Hinckley from out in Heronswood in Seattle was asking me what time he was on, and because he wasn't sure if he was going to be here for the whole thing, and I said, sure, we've got you for the afternoon since he's on the West Coast. And I sent him the list of speakers, and he said, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. You can put me speaking anytime because I want to see everybody that's on this docket. It's too good to miss. So really fantastic lineup. And then we've got another workshop with Bryce that's going to be online. It's 20th, 9 a.m. to noon, about pruning, and it's going to be, a lot of times when you do a workshop like this, you go out and you start pruning immediately. One of the nice things about having to rethink for Zoom class or workshop like this is you start thinking, all right, let's take a step back and really combine the best aspects of a live workshop with the best aspects of, a PowerPoint presentation. So if you understand a lot of the theory behind pruning, which tells you what to prune, when to prune, how to prune, it answers a lot more than if you go out and just start cutting on some things. So I think this is going to be really a very good program. People always have questions about that. When do I do it? How do I do it? Bryce will tell you all of that. And then the last programming that I want to put up here, this is not yet on our website. It is not yet open for registration, but we had to cancel all of our summer camps this summer. So if you have children or neighbors or grandchildren or know anybody who's young, you can tell them to keep an eye on our website for this. These programs will be, everybody will get packet of activity supplies at the beginning of the week or the week before. And then there'll be kind of, an introduction every morning with 2 or 3 hours worth of kind of crafts or experiments or work. And then everybody will get back together for a live 1 hour kind of thing where people, show what they've done, talk about it a little bit with a garden teacher. So it should be a lot of fun. But yeah, keep an eye on that. All right, talking about going global for plants, the Arboretum's really been going and exploring for plants really since the beginning. JC did some trips to Mexico with the late John Ferry. Gotta get a pointer here. John Ferry here from Peckerwood Gardens. They've now renamed the John Ferry Gardens. He's probably rolling over in his grave that they renamed it, but that's okay. But the reason we go exploring and why we always have and I hope always will, is that there are so many great plants out there that people aren't growing yet. There are improved forms of plants that we are growing already. And there are great plants out there that supply genetics that we want, like insect resistance, heat tolerance, cold tolerance. So a lot of it is for breeding work. And that's why we're doing this. People think it's to discover new species, and that's not really it, although it's amazing how much is still out there undiscovered. The hard part is figuring out if something is actually new or not, but we work with a lot of experts. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on. But, we have been doing this. JC did not do as much plant exploring as a lot of people think. He traveled all over and brought plants in from all over, but really himself didn't go out and do a lot of collecting. He made some trips to Mexico and a trip to Korea, really where he did most of his collecting. And his Korean trip was really exceptionally successful. One of the plants that's still widely grown is the Emerald Pagoda, Styrex japonicus, that he collected on Sehuksan Island. Another plant that is a mainstay is Viburnum awabuki chindo. These are plants that, have been in the nursery trade since he brought them back in the mid 80s. So really was successful. And in fact, I was years ago, before I worked here, probably close to 20 years ago, I was at a conference at the Chicago Botanic Garden about plant collecting. And one of the people there had done a survey of how much of the material that's been collected in the wild has actually made it to the public. And basically what he was saying was, and this was John Creech, who, the director of the National Arboretum at the time, and basically he was saying that other than the JC Raulston Arboretum, very few people doing collecting really got the plants. Very few botanic gardens got their plants out into the nursery industry. So that's really always been our goal. And Emerald Pagoda is still one of the best with great big flowers. But, people now sometimes say, well, why are you going still, most things are in cultivation if they're any good. And I always laugh because way back when Ernest Henry was told, he's sent to China to collect the dove tree, this old picture of him, the dove tree, Davidia involucrata, and he was told not to waste his time with anything else because everything good had been gotten out of China already. And, that was back in the 30s. And Wilson went on to, and other collectors collect just thousands of new and interesting plants. So there is still a lot there. One of my big regrets in collecting was I never collected Davidia, even though I walked by trees that had fruit, probably in almost maybe the same grove of trees that Wilson originally collected them on Imei-shan, right outside of maybe a half a mile away from a monastery. And I'm still to this day, I cannot think why on earth I didn't grab a few seeds of this. I'm really today, we've traveled China, and Mexico and New Zealand and other places collecting plants, but I'm really just going to talk about Asia today. And this kind of illustrates why, when people say, why do you go? Just in this, and this is not an unusual sight in Southeast China or Taiwan or one of the places, or Japan. In this just kind of 8-foot random picture, we've got, Aralias and Linderas and Photinias and Itea and oaks and butterfly bush, bamboos. Back here, this looks like, Cunninghamia. I could probably, if I blew this up, I could probably find 3 or 4 more things in here that are genera that we grow. And if I got really down into the herbaceous layer, there are probably gingers and orchids and toad lilies and ferns that are all great for us to grow. And so that's really why we're going. It is so diverse and so rich there, and the climate is very similar. Now, if I were collecting here, you can't collect oaks unless you have special permits. You don't collect grasses unless you have very, very special permits, and bamboos or grasses. So, I wouldn't just go in here and collect all this stuff, but it does show you how diverse it is. So people always talk about how do you get around. In some instances, we go out on our own, rent a car in Taiwan and drive around, but usually we're working with collaborators in the country. So the Taiwan Forestry Research Institute in Taiwan a lot. We work with Shenzhen Botanic Garden and the Chinese Academy of Sciences. We've worked with Hangzhou Botanic Garden. We've worked with some of the universities in China, and they're the ones who get us the permissions and everything to go out and collect. It can be difficult, on your own. There are things like landslides that kind of get in your way. Some of the roads are kind of scary. Can you imagine that in the US, this road on this cliffside? All of this is not rock either. This is all concrete. You can see it's kind of hollow under the concrete. And then they have, where the concrete has broken away before, they have gabion, baskets, just wires filled with stone that are holding up the road. I don't know if that would be Department of Transportation approved in the US. And this, you got a cone 20 feet away from a hole where one whole side's missing. That's, you see this a lot in Taiwan. So it can be kind of interesting getting around, even when you're on paved roads. This says nothing about the going on some of these roads, if you can hear the air quotes when I say that. And it can be pretty terrifying when you're driving. even more terrifying when you see that and then turn the corner and see this. You know, it's kind of one of those, don't say we didn't warn you. That sign is a real thing. And actually the road wasn't closed there. You could go back about 100 yards back from here and go off road and ford this little stream if you wanted to. It was tough, really bad on one trip where there had been some recent earthquakes, and man, our minivan made it everywhere. We only lost 2 hubcaps. And of course, if it gets too scary, you know, you can pick up something to drink right there at the gas station, a bottle of Taiwan's finest red wine. And you know, the other thing, and I'll get into plants, but it can get a little worrisome when you're out there. You know, this is in a kind of a public, you know, like a national park, but you got snakes, wasps, bears, and you got everything to watch out for. And we were miles on a trail. I mean, way away from anything else. We kind of stopped seeing much of any kind of civilization. And then we see this sign, and this sign has always cracked me up because it is specific. Bear alert. Don't disturb it. You know, we're kind of looking around to see if there was like a cave or something nearby where there was a bear in there. But we did not disturb it, so we were in good shape. You know, or this, you know, what does that mean when you're driving along and you see that sign? Caution, exclamation point, worrisome. All right, let's talk about collecting in China. We have spent most of our time in kind of this region, Gansu, Shaanxi, Sichuan, and then down in this region, with a little bit over here as well. What you're seeing to kind of get you, this little bit is Shanghai. Beijing is just south of there. And so the coast is very built up. There's not a lot of collecting right in on the coast, but there is an amazing mountain in Beijing called Tianmushan that's really got an amazing flora, and been there a couple of times. And then Taiwan as well. Haven't been to Taiwan in quite a while, but it's always amazing. So I'll talk first about kind of this Sichuan region. This is where some of the famed Mount Omei and Lushan and some other great mountains in that area. And it's where you find some of my very favorite plants. This is one that I love at the Arboretum, Cornus wilsoniana. We've got one right behind our visitor center, and it's got this gorgeous bark. So it's neat seeing it in the wild and seeing the variation you get from silvery white to this cinnamon and green. You can see that all the trees in this area kind of had that same color. And so that's what's amazing about seeing these plants in the wild, is you can get a sense of the variation they have. Pretty flowering plant. It's got a little bit of a funky, fishy smell for a couple of days, but otherwise it's fantastic. And it's one we're really we're working with the green industry to get into production. They're very interested in this. Really, one of the reasons we've collected it is because we've got a form with probably the best bark, but if it's out in full sun when it gets hot, it kind of curls leaves up like a lot of dogwoods do, and you see that white underside, and it can look like it's thirsty and wanting some water. It isn't really, but it can look that way. So we've got some other seedlings that we're hoping that are just now, last couple of years, being flowering age. So we're looking at their bark and looking at their foliage and also hoping for maybe some fall color, because our plant does not have good fall color. Another dogwood, Cornus controversa. It's controversa. It's controversial because it's controverse because unlike most dogwoods, which have their leaves opposite, the leaves on this one are alternate or subalternate. But this was a form with a really nice red petiole. It was really showy out in the landscape. So we did collect seed of that, and the seeds held on these red stems as well. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have a place to grow out a lot of these things. So we'll grow one or two, and we give others away to other botanic gardens and to our members and through sales and nurseries and things. But what would be nice is to have a spot where we could plant these all out and be able to evaluate them side by side, be able to plant out, instead of planting out one or two or 3 maybe for a shrub out here at the Arboretum, to be able to plant out 10 or 20 and really evaluate them side by side in the field. So if somebody has 20 or 30 acres of land they want to donate to the Arboretum close to Raleigh, let me know, and we can certainly put it to use. Other things in that area, some euonymus. There's really some beautiful euonymus that aren't in the U.S. For some reason, we've got there are a couple shrubby euonymus that are grown in the U.S., a couple ground covering ones, vining ones, but there's this whole world of evergreen shrubs that have this delicate foliage, deciduous ones, tree forms that we're just mostly unaware of right now that deserve some more love, I think. You see more of these in the UK than you do here. Dendropanics, I do love dendropanics, but I already gave a whole talk on those. If you want to hear more about panixes in general, go to YouTube and watch the Aurelioids talk. Acuba is another one of my love. They're such great workhorse plants. And this is what you love in the wild, to see this bunch of fruit. Of course, I didn't know, this Acuba fruit looks like it's green and goes brown. I don't know if it ever turns red, but that's not what Acuba himalaica is supposed to do. Himalaica should have red fruit. So what is it? Not really sure. But we are growing these plants so we can study them. And the Chinese would probably lump this into Acuba chinensis, but they'll lump a lot of things into Acuba chinensis. I don't know if I agree that this is chinensis, but it's something interesting. And then obcordata. Every time I find one of these new Acuba species, I get real excited. A couple years ago in China, we found Acuba albopunctifolia, which is one that I really wanted for a long time. And it's a pretty little thing, and it's growing in the nursery, and we've got males and females of it. So pretty excited about that. This was lost during I can't remember if it was an early freeze or a late freeze. I'd have to go back and look it up, but this is a plant that I had really wanted to grow, and it got planted out very small, and it just didn't survive. I think it was an early freeze because it made it through a winter, and then I think the following year it got zapped. It was still growing, but it's got these almost perfectly round evergreen leaves, bright red stems. This is it late in the season in the wild where we were able to collect it, but it's the poplar leafed lindera or spice bush. So it's the one that got away, one that I'll have to need to go back and recollect at some point, because it is I think a really good plant. I think if we collect it from high enough up on Lushan, it should be perfectly hardy for us. Tiarellas, this is like a black leaf tiarella. We don't still have this one going. I'm hoping that one of the folks I collected with still has it going. Every once in a while I'll do a talk like this and I'll say, oh yeah, I wonder about that plant, and go track it down to talk to everybody we shared it with, which is why we share plants so widely, is because sometimes we kill things and we hope other people don't, and we want them back so we can try and kill them again. And this is one that we really do need to get back. Sages, the woodland sages. Look at this Salvia amiana. That's the back side of the leaf. Unfortunately, in a greenhouse, it gets terrible white flies, but it seems to do well out in the garden in a partially shaded spot where you get these mounds of foliage, and then these cheery yellow flowers above the foliage in the fall, late summer, fall. Now we're going to move into this region and talk about, we collect along, there's a whole mountain range that runs along here, and we've been doing some collecting in there. We're going to start the Shaanxi side and then head over to Gansu on here. This may have been in a talk I did just the other day. I can't remember. It's getting to the point where I can't remember slides I put into talks and ones I haven't. So if I did, I'm sorry. We saw this and thought, oh, this is a weird aspidistra. And then we found flower stalks. And if you know aspidistra, it flowers down here at the ground. The cast iron plants, they flower at ground level. And realized this is an orchid. Chromastra appendiculata, kind of a mouthful. The first year we saw it, there were no seed pods on it, and you don't dig orchids and bring them in. That would be very, very illegal. So we unfortunately left without it that first year. But the next year we went, we were looking for this, had our eyes peeled, and found some with big, nice slump seed heads. And so these are in cultivation now. They're still young and small. We don't have it here yet. We send the orchid seed off to somebody else to grow out for us, because orchid seed can be pretty tricky. But I'm told he's got about, Peter Zale up at Longwood has maybe 8 different orchid collections that we've made going up there, that we made over the last few years, including this one and a ground covering Goodyear or rattlesnake orchid. Other fun things, this is one that's sometimes known as dead man's fingers. There are a couple different plants that will form these fruits like this. Some vines like Holbelia and Stauntonia grow vines, something like this. And then this one is kind of a sub-shrubby one. And the name is escaping me at the moment. If somebody knows, unmute yourself and pipe up, because it is right there on the tip of my tongue. Chris, do you know?
No, right. I don't know that one, Mark. Sorry.
It'll come back to me. But it's funny, you can always tell if monkeys are around. If this plant is around, you can tell if monkeys are around, because they will have eaten every one of these things. So it's got kind of a sweet fruit. It's kind of slimy and a little gross, but it's okay. But, it's a neat plant to have in fruit in the garden, even though the plant is kind of a rangy thing. This would never be, you're not going to find this at your local Home Depot or Lowe's for sure. In that area of Shaanxi, we were up top of a mountain, and we had seen something kind of high up on the mountain that was bright red, and could not figure out what it was. And as we got closer, we realized it was a lace bark maple, which I have never seen in the wild before. Usually it's growing in colder places than I actually collect. And it was in perfect fall color. It's all over, not a seed to be found on it. So we were not able to collect it. But there's been a big project with paperbark maple with the Morris Arboretum and the Morton Arboretum and some other folks. So we were able to share with them a new location for paperbark maple, and they've gone and done some, I don't know if they collected seed or just DNA, because they were doing kind of a genetic study across the range of it. So, we even if we can't share plants, sometimes we can share information about where to find them. You can see that bark on there. Oh, isn't that something? Oh, that was like a religious experience, seeing those lace bark maples. So now we're going over to kind of the other side in Gansu. We've collected there a few times recently and have been really excited about it. It's not always easy to go. It is cold when that water's coming down off the mountain in October. You got to decide whether you'd rather get your shoes wet or your feet on those sharp little rocks down there. But always fun. Sometimes I got a bridge for you. What you can't see is, well, if you look, it's like seated on both sides. Just one of the logs sits on there, so it rocks back and forth. And our guides and this little guy here, his father was Son, and he was Little Son. You just run back and forth across there like a squirrel. No problem at all with it. There's us chubby Americans, we had a little bit tougher time on it. But it's worth getting up there. And stream sides are one of the best places to collect, because you get some sun coming in. There's moisture. There's a lot more kind of microclimates in there as the streams move and change and do different things. And so you often get a whole lot of diversity up along there. You can also sometimes fall in the river, which has happened. It's funny when you're out collecting with people now, every time you're going and doing something like hopping from rock to rock across the river or stream, or going across one of those bridges, whoever isn't going then is often holding up a phone, videotaping it, hoping to get the splash in the water, because that's always fun in a top. Beauty berries are great. Sometimes I skip collecting beauty berries because they're so hard to identify. But this one had some of the biggest fruit I've ever seen on one, and it was relatively small. So we're really hoping this Calicarpa turns out to be something good, and we can identify it pretty easily. I think this one's going to be easier than some of the other ones. But that has the real potential to be a gorgeous landscape shrub. And Helwingia is a weird little plant that the stem actually goes up onto the leaf, extends onto the leaf, and flowers and fruits right there in the middle of the leaf. You can't get a flower or a fruit emerging from a leaf. It has to emerge from a stem. So the stem goes up the leaf. I don't know. I think that's sometimes some botanists are making up so that they can explain why this happens, but not really. You can kind of see on a leaf without fruit there that this is stem to right there. It's a real odd setup, and not sure why they do that, but these were some large fruits on it, and sometimes it would have 2 or 3 fruits right there. Helwingia there are male and female plants, so we were excited about this because we have what we think is the female form of this with a very narrow leaf. We have an expert here who says it's Helwingia chinensis, but boy, it looks different from some of the other Helwingia chinensis, but she is the expert. You know, and you find fruits like this on the ground, you start figuring, where is this coming from? And it's coming from a vine way over our head, an evergreen vine called Cadsura coccinea. Look at the big fruits. It's a vigorous vine. It's an evergreen vine. A lot of people don't like vines. I don't get it. Those of you here who were here from me last week know how much I love vines. I've got a seedling from this going that we grew out at the Arboretum. I've got one seedling at home that I'm going to let grow up a big pine tree and let it go from tree to tree to tree. Let's see what it does. Cadsura is also male and female, so we have separate male and female. So, you know, it'll take a while before we figure out what plants we have. Another reason we need space, but also a reason why I'm growing it at home is hopefully what we have at the Arboretum, hopefully have both male and female at the Arboretum, but if not, hopefully what I have at home is the opposite of whatever we have here, so we can propagate them both. And as we hiked back there, we found this group of very, very happy gentlemen. It was lunchtime, and let me tell you, I think they were still happy from the night before, had not stopped being happy all night, especially this guy with his arm around me. He's got his arm around me because that was the only way I think he was going to stay vertical while we talked. These guys go out and they live in this little hut. So 4 of these guys and one woman back here who does all the cooking live in this hut for close to 6 months, tending to these beehives. I'm not exactly sure why they have to be there the whole time, but they do. I think they make regular Moutai runs or liquor runs because they seem pretty well stocked on that, not much else. But they were really friendly. They helped us collect some stuff that we couldn't quite get to. And it's funny, this is, you know, it is 10 sheets on, you know, chopped down logs. They're all sleeping in this kind of one roof thing. There's a little area with where dogs were over here, but this is kind of just a little ways away from it. They've got a solar panel, and that solar panel, as far as I can tell, the only reason it was there was to keep their cell phones charged, because every one of them had a cell phone and was checking it and taking pictures and sending them on WeChat. And I'm waiting for the day that I come across somebody Chinese who does not have a cell phone, because in the last 5 years, I don't think that there is anybody in China without a cell phone anymore. And, you know, cheers to a great day of drinking. That's the face of somebody who has had enough Chinese wine to know exactly what it's going to taste like, and he is not looking forward to it. But it's Chinese wine. Our host where we were staying made himself, so he's going to make the best of it. But that's the best smile that Scott could muster before drinking that stuff. Little son actually liked it. He kept sneaking around and trying to drink it. Puts you in a tough conundrum. You know, you don't want to have a little kid drinking the Chinese liquor that you have there that his dad didn't want him drinking, but you really didn't want to drink it yourself either. So put you in a tough spot. All right, we're going to move down to to really far south, Guangdong, Guangxi area. This is where it starts to, you're really getting subtropical plants that are just merging into temperate plants as you get high enough on the mountains there. But it leads to some neat things. I won't talk about the Scheffleras because I've already talked about them, but you can see a couple different species of those growing there. But also, this is where we were seeing a lot of evergreen maples, like this one, Hong Long. This is one we named. The typical form doesn't come out this bright red, doesn't go to this kind of silvery blue. So this is one that we were really excited about finding out there. Other things, I once thought that nothing could be showier in fruit than a beautyberry, and then I saw Dichroa in full fruit, Dichroa yaoshanensis. Some of our members and supporters may grow this at their houses because we did distribute a lot of these. Now, and this here is a holy grail plant. I have never collected this in the wild. It is in the US. It wasn't for a long time. We don't have it yet, but this is Magnolia guangdongensis. That's the backside of those leaves. This is like it's got a small leaf. The leaf is only about 2 to 4 inches long, maybe half to 2/3 as wide. And it's really dark green, but the bottoms of it on some forms, there are multiple forms of it, in the wild, it does vary, but on the best forms is the densest, goldest, copperiest, whatever color, coppery, I guess, covering of hairs I've ever seen on any plant. It is amazing. It's just getting its way in here. This area, Fujian, Jiangxi, we were in for a little while. We got kicked out of there because we had permits. We were with Chinese colleagues. We were trying to collect on this Fujian side of the mountain. The mountain kind of runs right here where the border is. But this is all flat from coast to the mountains. And so when you get up high on the mountains, they have all kinds of military bases overlooking Taiwan. So we knew that, and we had actually told them that we really wanted to collect on this other side, but our colleagues brought us up into an area here, and the police ran us out. I don't think they could read any of our permits or anything. They just knew that they did not want a bunch of Americans there. And it didn't help that our Chinese colleague had a drone and was itching to play with it, so he sent that up in the air. But it was not a total waste. We did find some amazing things. This is Cercis Qingyai. It has amazing bicolor flowers. This is a red bud. This is the one red bud that doesn't have that heart shape. It's more diamond shape. It doesn't become cordate or heart, like the heart right here at the end. So it's a really easy one to identify in the wild. And this was one that, boy, I got excited about that. And this is us after we got kicked out. Rather drown my sorrows in tea than Chinese Mao Tai, but it's kind of a neat little tea tasting. Now we're going to go over to Taiwan. Probably collected more in Taiwan than any one place in China. And I still love it. I still know if I go back, I will see so many things that I've never seen before, even if I go to the same places, because it's like that every time. This is a styrax we collected. I'm not sure species. Does not look like what we grow as Formosana, but it could have been cut back when it was young. It lopped off and resprouted, gotten denser than what we've seen. Another plant that we collected when we were there with Tony Haven was this Dendropanix dentiger. I love this plant. Can't get nurseries to grow it, but I'm going to keep trying. And I talked about these in the Aureliads, these Fatsia polycarpa. That's a very big leaf one. This is a really cut leaf one. We find the cut leaf ones tend to be a little bit more tender than some of the other ones, so they don't always last. This was a holly that I really loved. And actually, my last trip to China, we found a bunch of really cool hollies that were entire leaves. This is Ilex sugarokii, variety Breva pedunculata. We've got it going. And actually, I take it back. This main picture was Breva pedunculata. This is Ilex sugarokii, variety Longa pedunculata. And you can see these long peduncles or fruit stems coming out from there. But the foliage looks the same on both of them. It looks almost like a little bit larger than a boxwood, but glossy green, real dense, tight form to the plants. and then showy fruits. So we've got some of these going, and yeah, I'm real keen on these entire leaves. Cynopanax formosanus, another one that I talked about the other week. This is one that we finally have going here on the East Coast. It seems to be fine. I thought it would based on where it grows in the wild, but we had struggled with it to keep it going. But now we've got it going. So probably by the end of summer, we'll start taking some cuttings on it and rooting it, and hopefully make it available to more people sooner rather than later. Oh, there's always the ones that you just can't get home. It had been this Cynopanax for a long time, but I finally have it, not from my own collections, but still. This is a fern, Dipterus conjugata. It's like the fern comes up and the frond splits into these two frilly hands, and it just covers steep hillsides. And I have yet to find somebody who has ever collected this and brought it back, whether plants or spores, and been successful with it. Never. Still holding out hope that one of these days I'll be able to grow this in the garden, because it should grow fantastically for us. Really should be a great plant, and it's beautiful. So little, those are some plants some memorable plants for me out in the wild in Asia. This is how we pack. This is a larger suitcase. I have a smaller suitcase with some clothes in it, but really when we're collecting, it's all about the plants, and we do it from sun up until late at night every day. This is what a bedroom looks like. Seeds out drying every night. You got to take seeds out and dry them, and so seeds that you collected the first night, you might be taking them out and drying them over multiple nights. But you also have to know which seeds can you not allow to dry out. Camellia seeds, if they dry out, they're gone. When we do collect oaks and send them to a collaborator at the National Arboretum, acorns cannot dry out. Once they dry out, they are no good at all. But then you also have, pine cones that you have to allow to dry so that they pop open and the seeds come out. And if they don't pop open by the time you're ready to go, you're fighting it with pruning shears and boot heels and whatever to get it to crack open. It can be quite the ordeal. And you can see we'll just leave them out every day and then pack them back up. Spread it out, clean it. Stuff like maple seeds are easy, but here we have rhodia seed that you have to clean off every one. I don't know what this is, probably like Stachyurus or something like that. Daphne maybe. You have to be perfectly clean, no flesh at all on the seed. And I put this in because everybody always asks this about bringing plants into the U.S. It is illegal to bring plants into the U.S. without permits. We have permits for collecting seed. We have permits for collecting plants. We have permits for collecting CITES plants, which are very highly endangered and heavily regulated plants. We never use that one because it's just the regulations around it are very onerous, and so we never do it. But we do always, we follow all the rules. We get permissions for where we're collecting, and that's why we use collaborators, because there's no way that we would get permission otherwise to collect in some of the areas where we collect. We get our plants inspected, which has for a long time been very difficult to get done with plants in China. That's why Taiwan is so nice. They're much easier to have your plants inspected there, but we've got that figured out with our partners, figured out how to get that done. And then we ship everything to the Department of Agriculture inspection stations. We use one in Atlanta. They've been very good to work with. And so they're inspected in Asia, they're shipped to an inspection station in the US where they're inspected again, and then they're shipped up to us. So it's a process, but it makes sure that we're only bringing in plants that we should be bringing in, and dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's. Now, there's beyond the plant stuff, there's the joys of some of the hotels. This hotel apparently was very proud of how well they were doing catching flies, because this was right out at the registration desk, right where you had to stand. So they, sometimes it can be a little iffy. But the nice thing is, what you're eating is fresh, because you can see it on the hoof and then on the rack or in the tank before it hits your plate. Although I will say that horseshoe crabs do not have a whole lot of meat on them. Turtles actually do, and turtle's good. Since I've been eating turtle since most of my family's from Louisiana. I've always liked turtle soup. I've never had it where you steam the whole turtle after you clean out the insides, and then you eat the shell. The shell gets soft on top after you steam it, and then you can eat the meat inside. But it's actually pretty tasty. But this was what makes it all worthwhile. You get everything back, you get everything sown, and then you start seeing some seed coming up and growing if you're lucky. This is, I believe, where that Acer Hong Long came out of this group. We wound up losing these. It was Camellia oleifera, oil camellia. I think it was oleifera. Oh, no. Diosporus oleifera, persimmon. A bunch of them came out variegated, but they didn't survive. We've got some kind of little conifer here, and I don't even know what that is, but that's what you want to see. All these popping up and things just coming up. And a lot of times it'll be one plant. We made a whole trip to collect one plant, Litsia, and we've got it going. So that trip was successful. All the other stuff was just bonus. So I'm going to end there. I will leave it on this slide for the moment. And if you have questions now that Chris hasn't answered, I'm happy to answer them. Chris, maybe you want to read it out, because I'm going to leave this.
There were a couple in the chat that I wasn't able to answer, Mark. Mm-hmm. Rebecca asked about the plant. They had the red back side of the leaves. What was the name of that one?
The real fuzzy coppery red? That was Magnolia guangdongensis.
Okay, and spelling of the name of the fern with the big splayed out leaves.
Okay, Dipteris, Dipteris. So that means dipteris, two-winged, pterodactyl, two-winged, or split wing, I guess, conjugata, conjugata, conjugated, joined.
So
tell me if you're
wasn't following along with Mark, so she's asked you to spell it again. So I'm going to type it as you go. Okay.
Okay. It is Dipteris.
Yep.
And then conjugata.
There we go. Good.
And if anybody ever sees that for sale, let me know.
I was going to say
that's already worked for me. Somebody told me that where I could find some yak roadies just the other day. So after my talk,
And Lynn is asking if we know of anyone that specializes in plum trees.
Anyone who specializes in plum trees? No, I don't really grow fruits. If you want kind of weird fruits, edible landscapes, and they may have some, they probably do. They grow, more common and stranger things, but I don't know.
Okay, and
I don't mess with fruit trees.
Paul is asking, how do we choose which nurseries we share plant material with?
So there are some nurseries that we work with, we've worked with for years and years, who are interested in the same types of things. A lot of times these are kind of niche nurseries. We certainly share with Tony Avent. We share with Kelly and Sue Dodson, who are going to be speaking at the Southeastern Plant Symposium. We share with Ted Stevens at Nurseries Caroliniana. So mail order nurseries that can do things in smaller numbers. And then we share a lot of plants that we think have breeding potential with the people who are doing the breeding with them. We share plants with experts. So when we collect irises, we share them with James Waddick. When we collect polygonatums and disporums, we share them with Aaron Floden. When we collect orchids, we share them with Peter Zale, both so he can grow them out for us, but also in that case, because he studies orchids and works with them. So a lot of times like that. And then we grow things here. And when something's a good plant, like say the Cornus wilsoniana with the white bark, we work with our North Carolina nurserymen to see if they're interested. So those are kind of the more defined ways we do it. But we also, when another botanic garden comes by or somebody from another nursery comes by, wants to visit, and we take them through the garden and show them plants and, encourage them to take cuttings. We take them through the nurseries and give them plants where we have extras. When I go and visit nurseries, I often bring a load of unusual plants with me that I think they may be interested in, or ones we have way too many plants of. So it's both formal and informal distribution.
Diana's asked what the blueberried plant was. I think that was the dicroa.
That was dicroa, and that species, we think it's Yaoshanensis, which is probably not available anywhere, but you can get dicroa febrifuga. Probably you can get it mail order from Nurseries Caroliniana. I think they sell a couple of them, maybe some other sources. But it has blue fruit like that. Is probably going to be revised and put into hydrangea. They're very closely related to hydrangea, and they will cross. It's unfortunate if they make dicroa hydrangea, because that takes away the opportunity to call it X derangea, the deranged hydrangea.
That's a good one.
But yeah.
Carol and Alexander had an interesting question. They want to know if you ever test the soil when you're taking seeds to see what the plant grows in natively.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen and so I can talk to people, so I can see people while I talk. Do we ever test the soil? No, we don't bring soil tests with us. If you've been hiking, if you do a lot of hiking, you are out and about a lot, kind of get to know where, some of the stones. So we know when we're collecting on limestone and other rocks like that. So we have some sense of the soil might be like, and we obviously don't bring any soil back with us. That's why we have to clean everything off, so we don't bring any soil or anything back. So that we wouldn't do. So no, we don't really test the soil. It would be nice on some occasions to have a little bit better idea of what it's growing in.
But it sounds like you're making some kind of records of what the environment is.
We do. We make every collection, we document, where it's from and, as much information around it as we can. Sometimes that's easier than other times. Sometimes you're standing on, a very, very steep hillside in the pouring rain, and it gets a little more difficult to have records as good as other times. We do try and do all that when we get back to a hotel, but if you've spent all day on a hillside like this in the pouring rain, and then you clean seed for 3 hours after dinner, sometimes the record keeping gets a little skimpier than you'd actually like.
And I think that was the last question in the chat.
All right. Thank y'all all very much. I actually do have to zip out right now because I have another thing going on now at 4. So I actually did it in an hour. Woohoo! First time. Thank you all for being here. This was enjoyable, and I will look forward to talking to y'all next week, whatever my topic might be. I'm not sure. Bye, y'all.
Bye. Thank you.
Everyone.